that we are going to be replacing a very old greenhouse plastic on our Master Gardener greenhouse here in East Hawaii. The greenhouse is very old, it's ripped in many places from windstorms. The first thing we need to do is remove the wiggle wire. You can see here a volunteer is using a screwdriver, a flathead screwdriver, to pull out pieces of the wiggle wire from the wiggle wire frame, which is holding the greenhouse plastic in place. Make sure to remove the wiggle wire from all the way along the sides of the greenhouse and also from the ends of the greenhouse as well. You can see me removing the wiggle wire from the hoop frame portion of the greenhouse in this clip. So we're at the point where we've removed all of the wiggle wire and we're able to lift up the plastic and look underneath at the wiggle wire frame. And at this point, the plastic is completely free of the greenhouse, and we are going to be able to pull the old plastic off to prep for new plastic. It's good to have a few hands to pull off the old greenhouse plastic as well as reinstalling the new greenhouse plastic. You can see here we've got plenty of people to help with the plastic removal. You'll want to make sure that you pull evenly so the greenhouse plastic doesn't fall into the greenhouse, get caught on anything, or damage potential plants inside or outside of the greenhouse. You're then gonna go ahead and fold up the old greenhouse plastic and use it as a sort of carpeting for laying out your new greenhouse plastic. So you'll fold it up in a way that you can use it next to the greenhouse, which will show up in a speeded up frame here. So now's the point when we are going to lay out the fresh new plastic. And you can see we're laying it onto the old greenhouse plastic so that we can use that to protect the fresh new plastic. One thing you should note is that oftentimes these greenhouse plastics have an underside and a side that needs to face up. That's because one side usually has a UV filter, and the plastic itself will mark whether or not there's a UV filter on one side or the other. This one had a side that said this side down or inside, and so we laid that part of the plastic down, and you can see that icon there slightly in this image. And then we unfold the fresh clean plastic, get it prepped to be tied up and pulled over. We're now preparing several hundred feet of rope to throw over the hoop house frame. In this situation for our 50-foot greenhouse, we have several hundred feet, and we are going to tie together different rope pieces. And we're going to show how we do that in the next few frames. So I've tied a heavy weight to the string, and I'm planning to throw it over. Try to get over in one shot without hitting anything. And we were successful. So you're going to want to do this several times over in order to have enough rope across the hoop house frame. So we've thrown the rope across the hoop house frame 8 times for this 50-foot greenhouse. So there are going to be 4 handhold points on the opposite side of the greenhouse. And on this side, we are tying up the rope to the new plastic. You're going to need some golf balls for this technique, which I'm going to show you a close-up in the next clip. You want to take your golf ball and put it underneath the greenhouse plastic and bunch up the greenhouse plastic over the golf ball, and then tie your rope around the top of the greenhouse plastic like so. Here's another angle to see how we tied on the golf ball with a slip knot, and this is us removing them. We also took this time to reinforce the wiggle wire frame, which was coming off of some of the greenhouse wood framing, which actually should itself get replaced, but we're hoping to get another 5 years out of it. So if you've got loose wiggle wire frame, take this time to reinforce it with extra screws. And now with at least 4 people on one side and 4 on the other, we're ready to pull the greenhouse plastic over. Everybody's holding onto the rope and pulling as uniformly as possible in order to get the plastic over evenly. Sometimes the greenhouse plastic gets stuck, so you want to get in there with something soft and help push it over the framing. Once the greenhouse plastic has been evenly distributed across the greenhouse frame, you can see in this situation we've got about 1.5 feet from the bottom of the frame, the hoop house frame, on each side, and very little space for the ends, even though that space is going to, that amount of plastic is going to increase as we tighten the greenhouse frame. So we got about 1.5 feet to 2 feet extra greenhouse plastic on the bottom of the hoop house frame and the sides of the hoop house frame. You want to pull it tight and start to put in your first fresh wiggle wire. Keeping the greenhouse plastic tight is important during the steps of reattaching the wiggle wire. So while we're attaching the wiggle wire on one side of the greenhouse frame, starting with the hoop structure itself, we've got folks on the other side on ladders and to the sides pulling the greenhouse plastic taut so that we make sure we don't have any issues with it not being even and having creases, etc. You'll want to overlap the wiggle wire by at least 2 inches when you're applying a new piece of wiggle wire on top of an already attached piece. You have the hoop form of one side of the greenhouse securely fastened with wiggle wire. You want to run along the sides of the greenhouse frame along the length, attaching wiggle wire, all at the same time while individuals are holding the greenhouse plastic taut from the side that doesn't have wiggle wire in it. So we were attaching the wiggle wire to the sides of the greenhouse at the same time as attaching the wiggle wire to the one side of the hoop frame that doesn't have wiggle wire. So we were working in tandem, attaching wiggle wire to both the roof part and the side structure of the greenhouse. You can see here we're finishing it off on the edges. We've already got wiggle wire up on the roof portion of the greenhouse, and we're cutting the wiggle wire to make it flush on both ends of the structure itself. Once you check it and make sure that it's good, you can go ahead and call the job pretty much done. So a successful greenhouse plastic installation should look like this. Pretty taut, bouncy, no creases or folds in the greenhouse plastic. Success!